Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine, Odessa. We are starting our working day. And now we are going to discuss Czech assistance to Ukraine, weapons and political support with our speaker, David Stulik, who used to be a diplomat in Ukraine. Good afternoon, dear David. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's start with the support that Ukraine is getting from the recent visit of President Zelensky to the Czech Republic. What can we expect now? These are combat helicopters that the Czech Republic will hand over to Ukraine. This is the first support with this regard. Last year, the Czech Republic handed over to Ukraine a Soviet helicopter. We are also planning to hand over Soviet tanks. Unfortunately, we don't have some other tanks, so that will be around 30 tanks. The new package will also include anti-tank missiles, several thousand of such missiles, and some other weapons. And these are Czech vampires. They are similar to Grads. Then and self-propelled howitzers that have been already given to Ukraine. This could be up to several hundreds of such units of the heavy weapons that have been already provided to Ukraine. There are like thousands of mortars and other weapons like anti-tank systems of the Soviet origin, because due to counter-offensive, there is a great need in equipment, ammunition, shells, etc. Don't you have the information about the activities of the factory producing Saudan that are quite popular in the armed forces of Ukraine? Could you increase the production capacity of such equipment for Ukraine to buy or get from the Czech government? And of course, this is sensitive information. And we have some issues with the expanding capacity of the military and industrial complex, because we need new resources, we need more professionals, we need more facilities, space, and equipment for such production. That's why we cannot expect a quick development of our capacity. It can take months or even years, but the production is ongoing, and I know that there is increase in 4 times when it comes to production of ammunition, and this is not mainly for the Czech army. And this ammunition is then handed over to Ukraine. We need to emphasize that a range of documents have been signed with the Ukraine for the production of weapons and ammunition, and that was during the visit of President Zelensky last week. But even before that, last year there was the memorandum signed for the cooperation between Ukraine and Czech military and industrial complex. And for example, for Ukrainian companies to work in the Czech Republic. And we will be able just to develop facilities in our territory. I can tell you about other support. This is not only in the form of weapons, but also in the form of training, equipment, maintenance, and repairs. The Czech Republic has one of the biggest base and facilities for repair of military equipment. And this support is very important. Yes, this is extremely important because the counteroffensive is ongoing. And even during defense activities, there is some damaged equipment, and we need to have a possibility to repair this, and we need for this secured facilities. And this is not the case of even of the Western Ukraine, because Russians keep attacking Lviv and Ternopil. And now we have a question from a journalist online. Don't you consider the training of Ukrainian pilots for the Czech aircraft Gripen? Do you consider the option? This is the question from a journalist. This is a very important and timely question. And today I'm not representing the government, and I don't have the full information, but I know that the Czech Republic is going to provide to Ukraine a simulator for F-16 simulator to train Ukrainian pilots. And because in the Czech Republic we are going to use the airplanes like F-35 and others, that's why we can provide the mentioned simulator to Ukraine for training Ukrainian pilots. And this is also very important support. And we have offered to Ukrainian pilots to train how to operate Gripens, because they are not only in the Czech Republic, but they're also in Sweden and in NATO member states. And nobody says that Ukrainian pilots should just use only F-16. And I know that there will be support with Gripens, and I do not have some more specific information. And the question from us, the Czech President Petr Pavel has mentioned that perhaps L-159 could be handed over to Ukraine. Do you know anything about this? Because there is not a big number of such airplanes in the Czech Republic. So these are the lighter jets. We don't have many of them, but in the framework of the memorandum between Ukraine and the Czech Republic, there is the foreseen the cooperation in the production, and perhaps there are some joint plans for the involvement of Ukraine in production of such aircraft. And we don't have some specific information about this because this is sensitive information, but I think that this possibility can be provided. And perhaps it has already been provided. And one of the statement of Petr Pavlo was that we need to pay more attention to the Russian citizens residing in the Czech Republic. And of course, some Russians, not only Russians, were against that statement. But are there any changes after the mentioned statement? Have any measures been already taken that were hinted in his interview? I think that, first of all, our services have been monitoring activities of the Russian citizens on our territory for quite a long time. Recently, the law enforcement bodies have been monitoring assets and property of Russian citizens. The Czech Republic has adopted a new law to apply European sanctions. So we have the similar to Magnitsky Act law aiming at Russian citizens. The Patriarch Kirill and 2 more Russian citizens having property in our country. So there is the strengthening of the monitoring over assets and financial flows and property of Russian citizens, and also now the Czech law enforcement bodies have been checking the ownership of the Czech companies by Russians. For example, one of the factory was owned by Russians, so there is an attempt to eliminate Russian control and Russian influence over activities in our country. And that activity started before the statement of our president. He just stated that there is a problem with Russian citizens. Some European countries have accepted 10,000 of Russian citizens, avoiding mobilization in the Russian Federation. The Czech Republic closed its borders for Russians, and there was the preliminary consideration of the application of Russian citizens that have been considered case by case. So before there was no understanding of the threat imposed by the Russian diaspora. Of course, not all of them are connected with the Kremlin, but still there are problems. And finally, we started paying attention to that. Can you share the perception of the Czech society about those Czech citizens who have come to Ukraine to physically support the armed forces of Ukraine as a part of the armed forces of Ukraine, or the Foreign Legion that was established after the 24th of February last year, or help in other forms the law enforcement structures of Ukraine? We have a consolidated opinion. So enough people support our aid to Ukraine, and they also call for a continuation of the military support. And that's why there is a positive attitude to those Czech citizens who just fight in Ukraine for Ukraine. So there are people who are ready to sacrifice their own lives. Because we think that Ukrainian struggle is also our struggle, and we do everything possible to achieve victory. So there are a lot of volunteers in Ukraine, and there are a lot of reports covering their activities, of course, without disclosure of their personal data. And but there are stories about the people, what they did before in the Czech Republic, how they support now Ukraine on the territory of Ukraine, and this just persuades the Czech society that this is the right thing to do now. So now there is a consolidated pro-Ukrainian position. And this also covers the support of the Ukrainian refugees in the Czech Republic, and also the military support, including the support of those people who come to Ukraine. David, thank you. And now the last question. And you used to work in the diplomatic corps in Ukraine, and I want to use this opportunity to ask the following question. There is the NATO summit in Vilnius now, and everyone is expecting some decision with regard to Ukraine in the framework of the summit. How do you think what we can expect from the summit? And the second question, how the situation can change in a year after the summit? I think that more or less we have a result of the summit. There is the joint statement of the states. So they say that Ukraine will be invited to NATO as soon as there is the full agreement of all allies, and as soon as Ukraine meets all the conditions. Here we speak about the eastern countries joining NATO, and there was the hope that there could be a formal invitation of Ukraine before starting the process. So unfortunately, there is still a delay, but the next summit will be next year in Washington, and in a year, a lot can change. because the situation is very dynamic. And of course, Ukraine should continue meeting its obligations when it comes to the reform of the military complex of the Ukrainian army and the risk management to approximate as quickly as possible to the NATO standards. And I think that those countries who are not ready now to invite Ukraine or to give a clear signal to Ukraine that it will become a NATO member state, there is 1 year to persuade them that they are wrong, that they should invite Ukraine to NATO, and to give guarantees that Ukraine will become a member. Because as it has been mentioned by your president, because such unclearness can also boost the aggression from Russia, because Russia says that there is no unified position of NATO member states how to develop relations with Ukraine, because we now have some strange situation when Russia is not the member of NATO state, but such big countries as the United States and Germany keep taking into consideration the opinion of Russia. So Russia de facto has this right of veto, and in the next year. During the next year, we need to understand that there is no need to take into consideration the opinion of Russia, that NATO should take care about its own interests. And Ukraine is an umbrella for us. Ukraine gives us this feeling of safety and security, because thanks for your struggle, we have improved our security. And Ukraine now pays a price for this. So this upcoming year should be used to the maximum extent possible to have a more positive decision. This is not a tragedy. This is rather an intermediary result. The work is ongoing. We should not be disappointed saying that NATO closed its door. Of course, Russians will say that the doors are closed. They will use it in their propaganda, saying that Ukraine wants to join NATO, but NATO does not support Ukraine. But this is not the truth. This is an intermediate result. Perhaps it will complicate the situation somehow, but I think that we will become eventually the NATO member state. Thank you, David, for your time. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for the information provided. Hopefully, we will have with us today online or offline if you will visit Odessa. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and have a nice day. Have a nice day too. That was the briefing of analytic David Stulik, former diplomat, European diplomat in Ukraine. The next briefing will be in 12 minutes and will be dedicated to the installment of the mobile shelter in Odessa. Stay tuned.